Hi and welcome. I'm Weiser Cornell, and this is Support for Stressful Times. Are these stressful times for you? How would you know? Well, you might want to pause, feel your body here and now. Take a take a breath. I didn't really consciously take that breath. That breath just came. So notice if a breath comes. Mm, yes. And how am I right now? I used to go around for years not ever asking, how am I? Other people would say to me, how are you? And I would say, fine. How are you? Fine. you know, that's what you're supposed to say. And then I learned focusing. Focusing is an amazing method of inner listening. And because of that, I began to pause and ask myself, how am I really? Do you want to do that with me right now? How are you really? And often what comes is a body sensation that can't easily be described. I feel a little bit of tension kind of in my stomach. Maybe that's telling me something. I won't I won't try to make it go away. I won't try to fix it or solve it. But I will say hello to it. How are you feeling? I'm also feeling a lot of calm, enjoyment. That might be another thing we find when we pause and say, how am I? Susan writes, some space and hope, and something in me is afraid the good will be taken away. Like afraid to be glad. You know, before I learned focusing, I didn't really know how to have mixed feelings. I thought the answer to how do you feel had to be one answer. I mean, I had mixed feelings, everybody did. I didn't realize I could say, part of me this and part of me this, or I've got space and hope, and I've also got something in me afraid it will be taken away, like Susan just so beautifully did. So nice. Marguerite writes, I haven't been able to tell how I feel in a long time, which makes me sad. Hmm. It's true that being able to tell how we feel is such a gift. It's precious. It's also an ability that can be cultivated, pausing and sensing how we feel. And then are there forbidden feelings, right? As soon as a certain kind of feeling comes to awareness, something in us says, well, you shouldn't feel that. Do you have anything like that? Would it, for instance, anger or irritation or anxiety? Are there any feelings that are sort of aren't really allowed or welcomed in your inner world? We'll notice that. We'll notice that. Lynn is writing, she's feeling anxious and relieved, just had mom's memorial. 1 year after she passed. I'm sorry for your loss. And it's nice to see family, but hard to be around so many. And you are aware of that, Lynn. So what a difference it makes to have a feeling and to have it and be aware of it. Awareness adds a whole other dimension to feeling. Awareness allows how we feel to take its next steps. When I'm aware of how I am, and this is the interesting learning, can I be aware of how I feel without then evaluating it, saying it's a good or bad feeling, trying to talk it out of it or make it go away. It's just a magical way of being if you don't have to solve or fix your feelings, but you can notice them. You can notice them. Haja writes, some this is feeling unable to admit that this part feels we have made the wrong house move. Oh, so you made a move. You moved house, as they say it in the UK. You moved, as we say it in the US. And now you're wondering if you made the wrong decision, or you maybe feel sure you made the wrong decision, but something else says, no, you can't admit that. Oh, that sounds like a hard thing to be going through, Haja. I'm sorry you're having to go through that. I wanted to talk today about decisions. We're going to get to that a little later. Daniel writes, I used to say fine when asked because anything else was like an invite for the others to butt in and try to fix me. Try to fix anything. I know, right? If I don't say fine, it's like I'm inviting you to start giving me advice. Well, that sounds like a very self-protective strategy you had there. Congratulations. Yeah. And Christina writes, sometimes the positive feelings get pushed away by something that says, how can you feel that? How can you feel good at a time like this? Very good point. We don't just push away quote unquote negative feelings. We might also push away positive ones. Well, I was thinking that these times, these stressful times in many parts of the world are confusing. Every day, my partner and I take a walk, and often what we talk about is what are the rules right now? And even though where we live, it's now okay to eat inside a restaurant, we don't want to. And then we have a friend who's wanting to meet us in a restaurant. And how do we tell her that we don't want to? Yeah. So this is a time of a lot of decisions and choices for many of us without clear guidance, really. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for sensing inwardly what's really right and what really fits us. Because I have a friend who, well, for one thing, she doesn't live with a partner like I do. And so she's probably a lot lonelier than I am. So she meets a lot of people at restaurants. So she wanted to meet me at a restaurant. And I love her. So I wanted to say, yes, that was my first impulse. Yes, of course. But then I noticed that there was an uneasy feeling about it. And after spending some time with that, I said, could we meet on Zoom instead? Because I'm just not feeling comfortable yet. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just wondering about you. We can keep talking about any feelings you're having and how it is to notice your feelings. And I wonder how you're feeling about decisions and the decisions and choices. And it is sometimes calmer not to have any decisions. I was just thinking back to like about 14 months ago, 13 or 14 months ago, when the pandemic came down, right? And many places in the world locked down. And that's what we did in California. We just completely locked down. There was a it was it was very stressful because there was so much unknown about how dangerous the world was out there. And yet there were many fewer choices. Many fewer choices. Things were no, I'm not going to go to see my friends anywhere. And I'm not going to go to the movies, and I'm not going to, and so on and so on. Calmer then in a way because of fewer choices. So wondering about that. Maria writes, I'm always torn making even simple decisions. Interesting. I wonder if you'd say more about that, Maria. What's going on in your feelings when a simple decision is in front of you. Christy writes, something in me feels physical and mental tiredness. Oh, that's such an understandable way to feel these days. With, with stress comes tiredness. With uncertainty comes tiredness and stress. And I feel it's really important to honor our tiredness, our exhaustion, that's something we may very well feel when we pause and feel in the body is tiredness and even exhaustion. And what do we mean by honoring that? You may not be able to stop and take a rest. You may be doing something, caring for somebody, and so on, where you cannot actually, right at that moment, stop and take a rest. And still, you can acknowledge that feeling. So we talk about pausing to know how you feel. And we also want to say that there's a next step after that, and that's acknowledging. And I was telling you that I don't recommend evaluating our feelings, deciding whether we should feel that way or not, whether they're positive or negative, even though those are natural reactions that we may have learned in our culture. We can say hello to the impulse to evaluate and change our feelings. What do we do instead? Say hello to the feelings themselves, the tiredness. I really sense tiredness. I'm feeling it. Yeah, take a little longer to feel in your body, feeling it in my joints and my bones, feeling it in my eyes. Yes, really acknowledging it. And that has a positive effect when we don't fight how we feel, but instead acknowledge how we feel. We can then decide what to do. Estella writes, I have awareness of my anxiety and I can be with it, but I don't know how to accompany it and to go on with my life. So that's a perfect question right here. We have feelings like anxiety. I feel that fair amount of the time. And then we have awareness of that, maybe feeling where in the body it is. I often feel anxiety in my chest and stomach. We could let a gentle hand go there. I know you're there. Now, how do I go on with my life? Well, sort of like that. Like I'm going to go on with my life, and some of my attention is still with the part of me that's feeling anxious. So it's like, do you know those baby carriers? Do you ever see those? The ones where you put the baby on the front of your body and you can go, I never actually did that, but I've seen them and I've imagined what it's like to do that. You can, do the laundry and do the cooking and there's your baby. Uh, it- that might be a way to imagine how to be with your anxiety as you go through the rest of your life. Something is here that's anxious, and I know it's there, and I'm giving some of my attention to it. And I'm also answering my emails and cleaning my house, whatever else I'm doing. Lily is giving an example of acknowledging feelings and making decisions. There are things I want to do, but something in me feels anxious and worried and says, is it safe? And I say, hello, I'm here to listen to how it is for you, meaning the anxious feeling. So decisions, it's an interesting question. What do we base our decisions on? Do we base our decisions on our most anxious feelings? How do I decide not to see my friend at a restaurant? Is it just because I'm anxious? I feel like there are other factors there. Like, first, I want to say hello to the anxious feelings in me so that I'm not the same as my anxious feelings. That's called disidentification or unmerging. I'm anxious becomes I'm sensing something in me is anxious. But now that I've said hello to an anxious feeling, I can still make use of it in a decision. It doesn't drive my decision, but it provides input into it. So I'm neither being ruled by my anxiety, but I'm also not being ruled by the the part of me that would be determined to live as if I had no anxiety. Uh, I can make my decision from an inner sense of rightness. So that's a very interesting point, that we don't just have feelings inside, we also have something called a felt sense. And your felt sense can be like a compass needle that points to what feels really right or not right for you. Maria answered my question about the thing about decisions, saying, I don't want to make the wrong decision. So there's a place to spend a little more time about what it is about making the wrong decision that feels so worrisome. Oh, Bonnie. Bonnie is here. Feeling scared to allow my sadness over the recent loss of my life partner. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Bonnie. Fear I won't be able to do necessary tasks, to take care of tasks related to this, keep my own livelihood going, and a sense of overwhelm about this. Wow. Well, no wonder you'd be feeling all those things. I mean, the first thing I'd recommend is to pause and be kind, be gentle to yourself. Say something like no wonder to yourself. No wonder. There would be so much there. Take time just to acknowledge all that's here. Give yourself that time. Something in you is really fearing you won't be able to do necessary tasks. You can say, I really hear you're worried about that. And out of that, out of spending time with these places in you that are worried about that, a new solution may emerge. You may realize that you don't have to do it alone, that there may be some help you can ask for in the friends that are gathering around you at this time of loss. Of course, at a safe social distance. Things are harder now. But yeah, be with what's here. And Jasper writes, I feel a deep sense of sadness and grief about how all the different phases I've had in my life are over and never coming back, and I'm getting older. That was another thing I wanted to talk about today, is loss and grief, because surely we're all suffering loss. And getting older is inevitably a kind of loss. Moving through the phases of our life has many losses in it. So do we have a way of dealing with loss? Very much so. I'm a big fan of grieving. I feel like grief is a natural response to loss. Can I face the losses I've had and acknowledge, yes, that is a loss. And I'm so sorry about that. So I'm really appreciating the things people are sharing in the chat and appreciating the feeling of being with you here. I just noticed that, oh my gosh, there's 20 new messages in the chat, and I can tell there's some part of me that wants to read and respond to all of them. And so I'm pausing and saying hello to that. I see there's a message from Sarah asking, how do I stay with both parts of a dilemma? Yes. So do I go with my friend to a restaurant because I really want to? Or do I tell her that I'm not ready and I need to not do that? And by the way, I did go to a friend of mine's 75th birthday party. Outdoors, socially distanced, and yet it's 75th birthday party, pretty special. So there are choices that are made one way, choices that are made another way. If I have two sides and I'm sensing that both are there, I want to wait a while with both. wait a while with both. We were talking about the felt sense, which is an inner sense of rightness or wrongness that's different from an emotion. After we've acknowledged our emotions, we have more room inside, something you can call an inner knowing, an inner yes or no, like a compass needle that doesn't necessarily happen instantly. It often needs time. It often needs, another friend of mine told me this morning, a certain decision took her a year. Yeah. And it was great to take that long. Sandy writes, I'm feeling that loss of life and growing older, especially as my partner has a chronic illness. And there's something else there, which is an acceptance of how it is now. And there's some space around now. What I love about feelings is they're always in motion, really. You know, there's a way that our culture, our language talks about feelings in a way that kind of keeps them immovable. And it's been one of my life missions to see if I can invite people to speak in a way that allows feelings to change. And so, one of the ways we keep our feelings immovable by the way we talk is to speak with the is to use nouns like the anxiety, the sadness, the tiredness, the exhaustion. Yeah. And then, the rage. And then how easy it is for that to change? Not very, because I've named it the rage, or I've named it the anxiety or my anxiety. So if we use other language, we realize everything we feel is temporary. It's how it is right now. The language I suggest is adjectives, verbs. I'm sensing something in me is anxious. I'm sensing something in me is sad. I'm sad. But sad is more temporary, temporary. I'm not trying to make my feelings change. They change because everything alive is always in the process of change. You can't be the same living being as you were a moment ago. You are in the process of change. Be present to how you feel, and it is present for you. Linda wrote, for myself, I allow myself to walk suitably distanced with a friend, and I feel like that feels less risky. Yeah, sometimes we have to sense more or less risky rather than completely safe or completely out of the question. So Sarah was the one who asked me about how to be with two sides of a dilemma and what next, right? So I'm with the two sides. Well, let's listen to both, okay? So I am going to be the listener to the part of me that wants to meet my friend at the restaurant. It says, I miss her, but most of all, I know she's lonely and I really care about her and I feel like I ought to do what she's wanting me to do. I hear you, I say, on the other side, right? So we're deepening our contact with whatever we feel, and especially when we feel two different things, by listening. You know how when a friend says to you, could you say more about that? Because I'd love to get to know what you mean. And you feel like, oh, this is a safe place to say more about how I'm feeling and what's involved. And yeah, well, we can treat ourselves that way. We can say to ourselves, I'd like to get to know myself better. I'd like to get to know these two sides of myself better, and so on. Estella writes, I refused a restaurant family reunion, and now I have to deal with the reproach. Yes. Yeah, no, that's a whole interesting, maybe we can talk about that next time. I'm fine with my own feelings, but what about other people's feelings? Yes. Well, just because we don't have very much time, I'm going to tell you my very quick way to deal with other people's feelings. And that is to say, they have a right to their feelings. I have a right to mine. They get to feel the way they feel. Your family feels, I guess, hurt that you didn't meet them at the restaurant. Okay. This is definitely something we can say to ourselves, to our own feelings. Okay, you get to feel that way. Something in me feels devastated, despairing. Okay, it gets to feel that way. Sharon, you were saying that it feels like a choice between being right and being happy. Yeah, it might be. It might be. But there's more there, right? The side that wants you to be happy and the side that wants you to be right. We can listen more deeply to both of those. Great. So I'm just going to summarize what I've said today as we're completing our time together. I talked about noticing how you feel, being able to simply feel and acknowledge how you are. And I talked about the next step after acknowledging, which is to being able to stay with it, listen more deeply, or let it be here as you go on with your life. I talked about decisions and how by acknowledging how we feel and being aware of uneasy feelings about a decision we've made already, maybe there's time to change it. We're honoring that process and we can follow something called a felt sense, which is an inner sense of knowing, an inner sense of rightness. And we talked about grief, about how the body knows how to grieve over loss, that we can pause and acknowledge that something is a loss and that that can help. And we also talked about tiredness and exhaustion and how it's really important to be able to acknowledge tiredness and exhaustion, even if there's nothing you can do about it. It's a very healing thing to do. All right, my dears, so nice to be with you today.